Back. One of the things we want to do is wait for the page to load before we run our code so that everything is loaded in order. And one of the ways you do that is adding a onload event to the window. So it's very, very common to sit here and say somewhere before we define our functions, we're going to say window dot onload equals init all. The init all name is arbitrary. You can name it just about anything you wanted. And if we're going to call a function when the window loads, then we've got to go up here and define it. And the things that we want inside that function to run when the window is ready are our event handlers. So let's go up here and say function init all. And I'm going to put in my curly braces to define my function, and that's basically all we did to it. So here on line 6 I have window.onload equal init all. That's what's going to happen when the onload event is fired on the window, and it's going to go up here and run init all. Notice there are no parentheses, so it's just assigning it initially. And when it does fire, it's going to go up here and run, because there are parentheses, init all, and we put in document by ID, the same ones we were using before. Let's test this in our browser, and I'm going to hit refresh. And is everything still working? Looks like it. No errors. So that's very, very nice. So let's go back and do our next thing. What we want to do is take the next step and add event listeners as a code keyword instead of just getting element by ID and adding the raw events in. And what that looks like is this. We're going to go into our init all, and we're going to add some event listeners. And typically what you do is you want to go grab something like document.get element by ID, and we want the name. So that's cool, but it doesn't do us much good just to grab it. We're going to throw it into a variable. We're going to take this pointer, this handle to document.getElementById by ID name. It's pointing to, it's a handle, it's a way of reaching in and grabbing that element, and we're going to assign it to a variable called myName. There we go. We've taken this whole thing and put it into variable called myName. Awesome. Now what we want to do, because we don't want to keep retyping that big long thing, is we can now use the variable, and we'll say myName.addEventListener. And we've got 3 parameters: the type, and the first one we want to do is focus, because what we're going to do is do something when the user focuses. We are going to call when that event fires, when focus happens on the myName element. We're going to call myFocus as a function, and we're going to use false as that third parameter because it's very rarely used that you would capture an event on the last part of the event cycle. If you remember from the Event 2 video, there's 3 pieces to the event cycle. So we've added a focus. We need to now do an add event listener for the blur. So we'll say blur, and we're going to, let's say my blur is awesome enough, and false again on the cycling. So we need to go create these functions. We'll create these functions down at the bottom here, and we will just say function myFocus. Got to make sure my capitalization is correct. And for a code block, function myFocus, in the code block, we are going to say that we want to change the background style to a certain color. Now, if you remember our video on this points to a parent item. And in this instance, it's not going to point to the window, it's going to point to the item that called it. So we can say this and make this kind of a generic catch-all for any time we want to do what we're doing with MyFocus. So we're going to say this.style.background. This is how you would change a CSS property of background. And we'll just change it to FF6. And there we go. Awesome. Now if we're going to do something on focus, we need to do something on blur. So we'll take, instead of MyFocus, we're going to call my blur, and we'll change it back to FFF. Well, that's pretty neat. What we're doing is we're taking this element, creating a handle to it, so we don't have to retype that whole big thing every time, adding an event listener to it. And the nice thing about doing this way is you can add as many of these as you want to, where you're kind of tied into one single thing on the earlier method. And when we are seeing this event fire, we're going down and calling these functions. Let's see what happens here. So if I hit refresh, our, of course, previous things still work, and when I click into a field, it changes, but I've got a coding error because it's not doing a blur, and I misspelled the B in blur. Look at that. Do you see that? My capitalization was wrong on the blur. So I'm going to change my B to capital B. We haven't added it to the email address. So let's do that. Copy and paste. It's the easiest way. I could retype this, but up here on lines 5 to 7, I am just going to copy and paste that and replace my name with my email. So everywhere where it says my name, I'm replacing it with my email. We're still doing MyFocus and my blur because we can reuse this because of this keyword. Very nice. One thing I forgot to do was change that to email. When you're copying and pasting, just be careful. Wow. Hit refresh, and there we go. So that's the successful second task. We'll be adding one more item to this in the homework.